I'm happy to have you have now Tsuchiya, Professor now Tsuchiya here. So just brief introduction. So he graduated from Kyoto University in 2000. 2000, is that correct? Sorry, I need it once. Then, yeah, he got PhD on Caltech in 2006, and he's now a professor in Monash University. And he has been studying many aspects of consciousness from neurophysiology and psychology and even mathematical point of view. And today, I think he is going to talk about related topics. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Al. Thank you for the introduction, Kai-san. Yes, today I'm going to talk about this topic. Is my red? You are red. From so structural point of view, and that's the key kind of concept today. And by the way, if you're interested in the slide for today's talk, this is the QR code, and this part, which is a bit hidden right now, is a QR code for the paper that summarizes today's talk. All right, so the outline of the talk, first I'm going to talk about the background, because I'm pretty sure that consciousness is not the kind of the thing that you think about scientifically normally, although you have it all the time. And also then the next thing is a qualia structure paradigm. This is a new paradigm that I'm trying to introduce to the field. And then here I'm trying to characterize my red, not as red itself, but rather structurally. And then a third one is empirical research examples. And there I'll ask, is my color qualia structure the same as yours? And then future outlook is the last part. So before further going, as a background, when you see the scene like this in front of very nice, this is a Mount Fuji, and then a big, probably Mount Fuji, and then the red sun, then you have experience of seeing this in front of that, right? And then by the term qualia, which is a philosophical term, what I mean is that phenomenal consciousness or quality of conscious experience per se, regardless of behavior or anything, just seeing this as it is, or subjective experience or contents of consciousness or qualitative aspects of consciousness, feeling, whatever, what it is like. This is all the terms philosophers uses. But basically, everything that you have an experience, you consciously, feel, that's the qualia. And then anything that you do not have experience, like, unconscious behavior or processes that you do not have direct access, such as the control of the blood pressure and things like that, that's non-qualia. And then by qualia, what we typically use is in two different kind of meanings. One is narrower qualia, and another one is a broader qualia. By when you see this sunset, and then we want to convey the impression of what you have right now, that's usually called as a broad sense qualia, what you have in the moment at that time. On the other hand, the narrower qualia refers to one particular aspect of the experience, such as the redness of the red here you see, or circularness of this sun. Just one aspect, but that can be compared with different kind of experiences. So with that, I want to take a poll here. If you have an access, do you have a cell phone or laptop with you, which you can have an access to the internet? Hopefully, those people who are on the Zoom, you can do that. If you can do the scanning of this part, QR code, or type directly, go to the slido.com and then type number 1191615, then you can participate in this poll. And I want to also do the exit poll at the end of the talk, so to see how much kind of a difference I made to you. So I want you to participate. And so the first question I wanted to ask is that, have you ever wondered if your red is the same red as my red? And presumably you have, and that's otherwise you probably wouldn't come to the talk with this talk. Now I have 25 people signed up already, so I think more is fine. It's increasing. Okay, great, thank you. 32, 33. Maybe it's stabilized. Is there anybody who is still inputting? Okay, I wait for you. 35. More is fine. And I'm going to do this several times, so just leave it open as well. Okay, 36. Okay, now it's good. So let's see. What's your general thought about this issue? Oh, that's great. So the overall, the vast majority of this room plus Zoom is that many people have wondered if your redness experience is the same as other people's redness. And then some people, like 80% of people, have never thought about it, and then some people don't remember, but maybe they had thought about this kind of issue in the past. So the question is that whether most of the people usually consider this kind of question is something that is purely philosophical or metaphysical, meaning that it's not scientific, and forget about this and then go into the physics or quantum theory or ecology or computation neuroscience, and then forget about this for the rest of the time. But I didn't, and that's the sort of the talk content today. And then these two things are the ones that I want to compare toward the end. So now I have two questions to you. One is that do you think it's possible to deal with qualia, this quality of experience scientifically? And then the second one is that do you think that and then the hard problem is a term that I'm going to explain right now. What is the link between the phenomenal and the physical? So phenomenal is this quality of redness, right? And then the question of is my red, your red is basically question of the phenomenal consciousness. But most of the time, what we scientists focus is these functional aspects or observable things, such as spikes in the neurons or physics of the brain itself and the response as a behavior. And then the link between these two is called a hard problem. And if you think that the hard problem is scientifically not possible to address in principle, then just say no. And then there are 4 options, I think. One is that yes to both. Yes, we can do it. And yes, this is a scientific, and this is a scientifically possible to address. And then the last option is that no to both. And then second and third option is one is to yes, and then the other one is no. In the vice versa. Yes, a question? Either way, I leave it to you. If you think it in principle, not, that's fine. And also if you think it's just limited only current knowledge or current method, that's also fine. Okay, we have now 28 people who still are wondering. Okay, more or less, then it's fine. So 32 people. Okay, let's move on. So 34. I think initially we had 36, but okay, all right. So okay, the current OIST majority is that yes and yes to both questions, and then yes, qualia is possible to deal with, but the hard problem is no is 30%, and both is just impossible, 15%, and then the last one option. First one is no, but the second one is yes, 6%. Okay, I wanted to ask you the same thing at the end, if I don't forget. Okay, so as to the first question, can we deal with the qualia scientifically? This is emphatical no, traditional. According to traditional philosopher, this is Dan Dennett, who died last year. And then his famous argument has been that qualia is ineffable, meaning that you can't just describe by words. For example, in terms of your quality of the redness, like this, other than you say that, or you point out that that's kind of similar to what I had yesterday in a dinner in a kimchi dish or something like that, or your head cut of your head, hair, you can't really say much. That's the reason why this ineffability matters. On the other hand, other scientific objects, you can give them a precise definition or characterization, right? So that's the end of the science. The another thing is that the enigmatic, unclear biological functions. If there is any functions of a qualia, then we can deal with that. But it seems it's very difficult to provide any functional definition or functional usefulness. And then the privateness. So whatever I have about this redness is all confined to me, and I can't just directly deliver to you. And that's the reason why one of the things is very difficult. And similarly, intrinsic. Qualia is inside for me, so I cannot really directly quantify from the external measurement. That's the sort of summary of this difficulty. So based on this kind of philosophical consideration, most empirical scientists tend to give up this issue of qualia. And as a result, they tend to focus on finding the correlates of this qualia or using binary responses. So for example, when I see things, yes or no, or is this looking like a red or purple, something like that kind of binary response, and it's correlated in the brain. That's their main focus. But then these types of the binary response together with the correlate search tend to be very weak in terms of the constraints on the theory. So as a result, in the recent years, you might not be familiar with, but this consciousness theory has been exploding. It's almost like a Cambrian explosion. Currently, there are more than 100 theories has been proposed, but not so many experiments can constrain this one is really infeasible and this one is feasible and so on. It's like it's bifurcating many times over the years. But my answer provisionally is that we can, yes, deal with that scientifically. And my particular approach I want to introduce is a qualia structure approach. And together with some particular theory called integrated information theory that also deals with the structure of the consciousness. And many other scientific approaches are also possible. So, by the way, if you have any questions in the way, especially if it's a quick one, I can take it. Yes?
So how do you define scientific? I mean, like, what are your criteria for a scientific measure in order to pose this question?
Okay, that's a very good question that I try to address throughout the lecture. So if at the end you are not convinced, then maybe you can just say no to that, exit poll. And then maybe we can chat further, probably. Okay, so the qualia structure paradigm, this is a little bit of the advertisement, but I have some grant from Japan JSPS funding to establish this interdisciplinary kind of research. And with this qualia structure project, what we are trying to do is collaboration across different fields like mathematics and also neuroimaging and also the language and the phenomenology, philosophy and development and the information and things like that, as well as the robotics as well, to bridge the gap between these fields. So what we are overall advocating is a structural approach to qualia. And then by that, we trying to lead this consciousness research in an international way. And as a part of this kind of the effort, we are also kind of teaming with our researchers working on the integrated information theory proposed originally by Tononi and others. And then we are doing the summer school this year, and then potentially next year summer school in Okinawa we are planning to do. And if you are interested in this, summer school, then please take a look at this, YouTube video list here. So, so that's a sort of the overall kind of term of the qualia structure. But what it means exactly? So the qualia structure paradigm also is founded on the mathematics called category theory, and there. The idea is that to characterize something that is so difficult to define as it is through the relationship. So, as I said, red is very difficult to characterize or, barbarize above and beyond this, right? But what we can do is to characterize this in relation to others. So for example, this movie shows that even though you cannot really barbarize the quality of the redness itself, when you see this A and B to be like similar, and then you can compare each of this object A to many different colors, and then you can also get the comparison of the B to many other colors in the same way. And if the relationship between A to others and the B to others matches exactly, then there's no point to say that oh, A and B is different, because external relationship is completely identical, and you cannot basically distinguish them. So that's the idea. And in fact, this kind of idea has been there in the field outside of consciousness. So for example, meaning of the words, famously introduced by Fernand de Saussure. I don't know if you have heard of this, so the modern father of the linguistic. He says basically meaning of the word is defined through the relationship with other words. And maybe you have had an experience when you're a child to kind of look up some unknown words, and then what you basically find is that the word is explained by another word. And sometimes there's circular kind of relationship, right? From A, and then you are told to look at the other one, and then that one is look at the other, and then so on. It's really ridiculous, but that's the way the word is defined. And the properties of the animals or plants in the ecosystem, you can also intrinsically try to characterize what the octopus is, but without doing that, how the octopus is kind of living in the sea, or how it eats or eaten, also characterize octopus as it is, and also black holes. That's a physics example, but you can't observe it directly. But its relationship with the other neighborhood object is possible to observe or measure. And something like infinity also can be distinguished in many different kinds by how it interacts with other types of infinity or something like that. And finally, personality-wise, you can characterize or understand myself through this, attending to the talk, but also you can look at, my connection on the Twitter profile or Facebook and see, I'm connected with, with other people and so on, and also living in Australia and things like that is totally impossible to infer from or measure directly from the relationship. Okay, so and these are all proven, surprisingly to me at least, in the mathematics called Yoneda lemma in category theory. This is a very enigmatic kind of symbols, but you don't need to understand. And eventually, what it means is that the relationship between A and the others are equivalent to H to the B to others. Then A and B needs to be isomorphic. That's the consequence of this lemma. So far, is it all right? Okay. So the structure of a qualia. What I'm trying to convince you so far is, or introduce you, is that the infers the property of the redness through the massive web of the relationship with the other qualia, or in particular color in this case. And then one possible, empirical approach in terms of the scientific kind of, way is to get this kind of similarity reports from many people. And as an example, I start with this, case examined, applied for the children. So in developmental psychology literature, children, I don't know how many people have kids. Okay, roughly half or so. And then it may be a bit surprising, but cognitive scientists or developmental scientists tend to deny that they have color experience, especially if they are below 3 years or 4 years old. The part of the reason is that children actually, compared to adults, where when they are shown different shades of the color, they can totally, and also reliably distinguish different colors in so-called basic color terms. But children's color response is quite random, and especially blue and green is mixed up quite a bit. If you carefully observe 3 to 5 years old, this is likely to be true across many cultures. And this is the case of the Japanese, but it's also replicated in other cultures as well. And based on this, it seems like, if you do this kind of experiment, or if you infer children's color experience based on their reports, then their color world is completely mixed up and chaotic, right? However, this is not an extrinsic relational characterization. So what we did is to ask kids to report the similarity between these different colors one by one. And we developed this iPhone application to touch and then report how similar it is. And that was a key to our success, actually. It turned out that children below 5 is very bad at the mouse clicking or keyboard typing. So, but they are super good at doing touching, actually. My son, in fact, unlocked my phone when he was like 2 or 1 year old, actually. And so they were able to do this. And then surprisingly to me, when they were asked to do this kind of similarity judgment across 9 colors, then they were pretty much similar to the adults. And in fact, when we visualize the relationship between the colors across different 9 colors, blue to purple, like this way, and then the different symbols, 5 to 6 or adult and 3 to 4. This circle is a 3 to 4. And then 5 to 6, and also across China or Japan, basically, everybody sees the color in the very similar relationship, and it's almost the same, really, at the level of the group. And if you look at it really carefully across different, ages, then there is a very weak but some substantial, the very weak but systematic and difference start to emerge across age. So the red and blue in this particular color seems to be more categorized as more different when you become adults. But other ones, other color pairs are more similar as you become adults. So there is some kind of categorization going on as a function of the age, but basically, that structure is almost the same across all the ages, from 3 years to and on. And we are trying to go below this age in the future. Okay. Any question about this? That's fine. It's pretty simple thing. All right. So, but this doesn't tell us still. Yes.
The development of visual system, like cone cell.
These things. I don't think so. But we don't know. Yeah. If you also, we are also interested in how this also changes as you go more, aged, like really old, because some people say that pretty old people have a yellowed, loss of the blue light cone and things like that, but that's unknown yet. All right, but this still doesn't tell us much about, is my blueness or redness similar to your blueness in the exact way? So what we want to do is to make it more scientific in a more systematic and also more large scale kind of way. So how can we infer the structure of the qualia by estimating through more massive kind of collection of the similarity rating? And that's what we try to do in this experiment. So basically, this is a slower version of the exact experiment on the online. If you sign up this experiment, you can do this over 30 minutes, and then you can contribute to this data set. So what we do is to briefly show two patches on the display at an unpredictable location for 250 milliseconds. You can't move your eyes. And then you are giving this similarity between 0 to 7. Okay, and then just repeat that many times. So something like this. And then this is red and pink, so maybe it's 2 for me. 0 is the most similar, and then blue and green, so that's like 7 for me. And then this, there are 2 shades of the green, so that's very similar. To me, it's 0. And then again, green to light blue, that's different but a little bit similar, so maybe 5 or something like that. So you repeat this across many people and also many trials. Yes.
The reason you only show it for 250 milliseconds?
Yes, that's a good question, and that's because we want to remove the artifacts of eye movements. we want to make sure that people are seeing things in a very brief moment and then still can do this kind of task. That's what we wanted to test as well. Yes.
How consistent for one person to say the same?
That's very important question, and that's also something that we do to quantify and also exclude the people. So unknown to the subject, we include the repetition of the same color, a part of the experiment, and then when we compute the correlation between the first trial and the second trial, over 50 trials or something like that, then there's we can compute the significance of the correlation. And if it's not, then it's likely that people are just doing it randomly. And we only take this in significant people, but most people are highly consistent. Okay? So the point of this experiment is to go from the structure of the color qualia. This is a hypothetical kind of entity, and then not necessarily Euclidean space, but I'm visualizing this just for the moment, as an example. And then measure the relational properties between the qualia, and then that's the dissimilarity matrix. And here it's a 93 colors by 93 colors. So roughly speaking, there's a 10,000 combinations. And previously, in psychophysics world, psychology world, 10,000 combination was impossible to get, or takes too long time to get. But nowadays, if we do this in an online experiment, you can get this kind of level of the data in just 2 hours or 3 hours across the world. And we got more than 100,000 people's response, and that stabilizes this kind of data really quickly. And then based on this dissimilarity matrix, we can infer this kind of structure. That's what we are doing.
Oh,
yes.
one simple question, but
yes.
If we represent the color by the hue saturation value, I think we will get similar things, no?
That's a very good point, and then that's not at all.
Oh,
yeah, that's very interesting point, and we have a paper already published. This human-based dissimilarity matrix is completely different from the RGB value or CIE lab value, and we just do not see the same. Yeah,
good.
yeah. And I'll come to you later, maybe at the end. Just briefly, GPT-4 actually produces very similar results to ours, but that's a last point. Okay. And then based on this, what I wanted to transform the question is that is my red or red? That's not a good question to ask scientifically. So we wanted to do it in a structural terms. And then in the end, is my color qualia structure the same as yours? That's a question, new question. And then how we can compare the structures, that comes to this sort of mathematical or computational part of these things. That's a collaboration from philosophy, psychology to now finally computational neuroscience or mathematics, unsupervised, unlabeled alignment. So traditional supervised method, usually this is a thing that people do in the field. It's an alignment between the labeled objects. So if you have lots of 93 colors, then usually you want to focus on 93 colors itself, right? Like, rather than soil, you want to, focus on the plants or trees. That's the sort of default option. But if you do that, then what you can do is to, at most, computing the correlation between the matrix or, the matching rate or something like that. And then that's what has been done in the field. On the other hand, what we are doing or introducing from the category theoretical perspective is that, no, what we want to do is not to assume the label matching, but let's start from the relationship. And then what we want to do is to see whether the relationship between red to others, are they similar to this guy to others, or this guy to others, this guy to others, which is not present in this, even in this space. So to do that, we need to take relationship as a primary thing, and then objects as just a placeholder. We can make it even completely blind on both sides, black to black, but still, relationship can be analyzed. And then use this technique called the optimum transport, as I introduce next. So what we do in practice is that how we can align the structure relationship using this technique called the Gromov-Wasserstein distance. So it's a distance between the two structures. So if you have two dissimilarity matrix like this and this, obtained from two individuals or two different groups, which looks kind of different, but it also looks similar. What do we do without knowing the labels? What we do is to quantify this, a little bit of scary kind of equation, which is that over some kind of indices, compute first a distance or dissimilarity between I and J, Dij, and then K and L. This is a distance between K and L in this space. And then multiply by two elements in the one matrix called a transportation matrix. And the rule of this game is that you need to transport all the stuff or probability from one side to the other. So you need to definitely move some kind of things. But if the distance between this side and this side, left side and right side, is so different, then adding some kind of weight gives you the distance. So it becomes less optimal. But if the, let's say I and J's similarity is 3 for you, and then K and L similarity is also 3 for me, then this term becomes 0, right? Then if that's the case, then you can make this gamma matrix corresponding to these two elements for me and you to be infinitely big. It doesn't matter. And then that's the way to find the optimum way of transportation cost. And if you do that, then eventually, by effectively, you are kind of moving around this space of this shape to align this to shapes completely, or at least optimally from this perspective. And then finally, after finding an exact match as much as possible, then finally you reveal the labels to check the accuracy of your label matching. Finally. Okay.
So Tsuchiya-san, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So how does this distance-based approach handle the cases of translation and then symmetry? For example, the distance structure between 1 to 10 is the same for the 1001 to 1010, or -1 to -10. So, so in such a translation or symmetry, even though the underlying objects are different, you consider as equivalent?
Just to understand correctly, maybe I missed something, but just to make sure, this element or the input of this matrix, transportation matrix, is always 0 to 1. But you said something like negative value?
Oh, yeah. So, for example, if you consider like a set of the integers, and then the distance structure between number 1 to 10 is exactly the same as the distance structure from 1001 to 1010, or -1 to -10.
Yes. Yes, I understand. So you are thinking of a left structure as an integer of 1 to 10, and the right structure to be 1001 to 1010, right?
Yeah.
And then the distance, in that case, we can completely match this, kind of a distance structure.
Yeah. So then you consider 1 and then 1001 are equivalent.
In that sense, yeah, that's equivalent. Yes. So when we call, in other words, if you translate that into the psychology kind of experiment-wise, what it corresponds to is, for example, for me, red and orange is sort of very similar, 1. But for you, probably Kenji, you feel it as 2. Everything is, kind of double, for you. But,
right.
It's exactly the same in terms of class structure.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So you kind of assume accommodate such a like a scaling or like a translation. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Yes.
I still have difficulty to understand what is your similarity based upon. For instance, like if you have only 2 colors, blue and red, you said you would use the relation between these and some other items to decide whether or not they're the same.
Right.
In a set of 2 colors, blue and red, Do they have any relation with each other?
So in terms of relation, that's a very also interesting question and important. We need to think about, especially in the case of the qualia or consciousness, you need to think about the context.
Yes, in the context of
And in the context of our daily experience, you just don't have only two colors. You have a multitude of colors, and we are setting just choosing 93 colors in this particular case. But many people use different kind of criteria. That's to some extent unnecessary. But our instruction is to give your subjective experience of the similarity.
But you argue based upon a mathematical phenomenon, and
Right.
then the notion of similarity should work regardless of your set of the size of your set. Like so, the set of two colors, blue and red, they don't seem to have any correlation with each other. Hence, they should be equal, right?
Maybe we can talk about it later. Yeah, it seems a bit complicated. But let me come back to you later. Okay, so then now let's move on. So with this approach, what I wanted to say is that if you have set of the dissimilarity structure like this and another one, then we can potentially find a match, and then we can potentially have an exact label matching like this. In this case, just from the relational structure, my red is your red, but in this case, my red is your purple, and then that preserves all this relationship. Okay. So empirically, what happened was that a group of subjects for these normal trichromats people, when they did this experiment, this is like 100 people's similarity matrix, and then from this inferred structure is like this, and then another group of the subject non-overlapping, you get this, and then the shape looks different, but it doesn't tell you much because this is a low-dimensional projection of things. What this optimum transport does is to find some particular value of the hyperparameter and then to minimize this a distance. And then at the minimized distance matrix, this is what we get. And then here I already put this label of colors, but this matrix itself is obtained without any labels. Okay. And then after finding these things, you see that there is a almost very good diagonal lines. This means that many of the stuff that I put to transport is on the exact matching pairs. That means that there is almost zero distance. And as a result, if you try to kind of rotate and then find some kind of match between this and this, indeed you can find something like very similar. And trying to look at the exact match of the label within the one neighborhood or three neighborhood or five neighborhood, within five neighborhood, it's almost perfect. So that means that it's a very slight shades of red or green or something like that. But this group of subjects thing is almost the same within that particular color shades. Okay, that's what we found for the normal people. Yes.
These points where the whole thing gets a little fuzzy, are they reproducible across groups?
This one?
Yeah.
Or this one?
I mean, not in the transport matrix. So the points, there are points where it's very clear, and then there are points where it's fuzzy. Are these reproducible across groups?
Reproducibility. So this is basically the quantification of reproducibility over 20 reproduction of the many different splits of the 100 subjects. And basically what it means is that one corresponds to the exact diagonal, but the three corresponds to the neighborhood within three. So even if you feel like there is some kind of mistake over there and there, it's very similar kind of mistake, like shade of the gray to slightly different kind of gray, or blackish blue to blackish green and things like that. So that's what it means for this. And then the variation across repetition is quantifying that reproducibility. Okay. All right. Yep.
I was wondering if the points where it gets fuzzy are sort of at the peaks of the different cones, right? In a sense, if it's related to sort of Fisher information in that.
Right. That's very good point, and I don't think we have specifically looked at that, but yeah, that would be interesting. All right. But something similar will come to the next slide. So this is the case when we split the colorblind people. And the colorblind people online is also possible to detect using an online version of the so-called colorblind test, Ishihara test. And then when we quantify that, then these are the typical kind of similarity matrix that they produce. So supposedly they cannot see the difference between red and green. Okay, and in the male population, it's said that roughly like 5 to 10% of Caucasian to Asian male have this condition. And in my lab so far, I have actually encountered at least 3 such a persons in my student. And whenever I ask them, do you not see the color? They almost always say that that's not true at all. I see color all the time, but the color they see is slightly different. And then the way they are different is a bit difficult to express in the words. But what they say typically is that some kind of shades of the color is sometimes difficult to distinguish between them. But other people, for other people, it's just similar. This has been kind of taken as a sort of the conception that they do not have a 3-dimensional color space because the red and green completely collapse, and then blue and yellow is there, and then a black and white is there. So it's like a 2-dimensional. But when I ask them, is it like a 2-dimensional, they also think that it's definitely not 2-dimensional. They are much more really richer color experience. And in fact, whenever we did this repeated experiment, the dimensionality of the similarity structure is at least more than 5 or 7 dimensions, both in normal people and also colorblind people, which corresponds to their subjective reports. And in fact, you can see that it's not a pure flat kind of thing here. And between different groups of the colorblind people, they match quite well. And the level of the matching is actually similar within the typical people. However, when you finally try to match align between typical versus colorblind people, then this best aligned kind of structure is still super messy here. And no matter what we do, it's almost chance here. So in fact, the structure-wise, colorblind people and typical people have a different kind of structure. But so this was to the extent that we described in the paper. And after that paper is published, we did a further experiment and analysis, and they find to arrive this, in a sense, very interesting and surprising kind of finding to me, which was that in the 1992, some people actually did similar kind of experiment on the very small subset of the colorblind and typical people, and then they reported this structure for typical and colorblind people in terms of color similarity. Do you notice something? I mean, I'll just explain. So this is the green, turquoise, blue, violet, purple, and the red, orange, gold, and the yellow. So it's sort of a similar kind of structure as I showed in the beginning. Children also have this. And this is the colorblind people. Turquoise, blue, yellow, violet, purple, green, red, orange, gold, and yellow. In fact, the difference is only green. And everything else is pretty much the same. And when we also remove the greenish kind of shades, then those two actually matched pretty well. And it's not 2-dimensional at all. So that's probably first evidence, I think, to suggest that we are pretty much seeing the same thing, except for some shades of the green, which looks similar to kind of between the turquoise and the yellow for the people, the typical people. So, all right, then so far the qualia structure project is I introduced that the Yoneda lemma inspired characterization of qualia and quantifying similarity structures among qualia using large-scale site physics. And then aligning qualia structure without labels is possible, and a high accuracy alignment across normal trichromats, as a low accuracy between the trichromats and the colorblind people due to anomaly. So the next step from here, which we don't have yet, is the aligning between the qualia structures and the causal structures. What I mean by that is that so far we have been kind of I try to characterize different types of experience within a person, and then compare that with another person, which is missing here. I forgot to do that. But then in collaboration with the neuroscientists, what we want to do is to try to derive something that is kind of relevant to this qualia structure. And one way to do it is to utilize some kind of formalism of the structure to qualia kind of a translation project. And one of the things is this integrated information theory. And it has a specific recipe, sort of, to give you that if the neurons are connected in a certain way, and then becomes activated in this way and this way, then it should generate this type of structure. And then if this is true, then it will also have some kind of structure relationship between the structures. So for example, this is when this person A is experiencing redness at the fovea, then this may be the corresponding kind of a structure unfolded from the brain. And then different kind of structure in qualia may be related to different, similarly related kind of structures. And then eventually between these levels of metastructure, we might see the correspondence. And then if we can do that at that level, then eventually what we want to do is to go to this.
Yeah. What is it? That's one direction.
This one.
And what does the node represent? Neurofiring or what?
So here I'm talking about particular experience. Experience. So let's say the red dot here is this person A experiencing red.
Okay.
And then the other one, maybe this is like an experiencing of the blackness or something like that. And then this arrow corresponds to the distance or dissimilarity. Yeah.
Arrow, direction of arrow is not important.
It will be important, but today I didn't talk about it. I talked about it in Tani-san's lab days ago.
So, but the arrow is not temporal transition, but the causality direction.
That's actually also very important point, and I didn't talk today. But arrow can be transition from one state to the other. And here, in the case of qualia, I think it's not super important probably, because after seeing, let's say, computer here, I can try to see, like a plant or bug or whatever. So transition from one to the other is always possible, especially on the TV, right? But in the case of the neural activity, transition from one to the other is to some extent constrained in a real world, but you can also intervene by optogenetics and things like that. So to that extent, it's also possible to break causality. Okay, so what I was trying to say is that once we have this interpersonal or inter kind of entity qualia structure comparison, and so within entity comparison or structural relation between the qualia side and also physical side to unfolded cause effect structure, then eventually we may be able to do this kind of causal the commutative diagram. So that's called commutative diagram in mathematics. And then once we have this, then we can address various kind of interesting question about, let's say, am I seeing similar something similarly to the babies or insects or octopus or plants or whatever in this side, because we can go from this way. This level of the comparison is deceptive. Like I mentioned a little bit, GPT can mimic this kind of functional response, but their functional architecture is completely different at the bottom side. So I don't think we can say meaningful kind of statement about that. So at the end, I just wanted to briefly mention the list of the things that we are trying to do, like how this qualia structure changes depending on attention or words or state of the people, like depression and also emotion and so on. Different kind of modality sounds, and also different diverse people, like autistic people have it seems they have a different kind of structure for the touch structure. This is very interesting, Nakano-san's things. And then also we are trying to do all these experiments again with based not only the online experiment, but at the individual level, which is very hardcore experiment. And then eventually we want to also reveal why color feels this way, but very dissimilar from taste or pains or smells. From this kind of structural approach, I think we can address this to some extent. Yeah, I think that was what I wanted to say about that ongoing state. So the conclusion is this: today's focus was first of this thing, establishing a paradigm to study qualia scientifically, and so relational structural approach I introduced. But before closing, I wanted to ask you to do this again, and after this one, there's a field for the question and comments. So feel free to leave the comments after this. I'll just wait for you to enter your response for now, up until 36 or so. All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe Kazahara-san first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like to construct the structure, we needed some distance. That's I get a message from this slide and then talk. And then my question is, so to get the distance, which is like in this case, like a sense of the distance, it's like perceptual distance. Do we need a qualia for get the perceptual distance?
That's very important question, and we are now, in a sense, it is asking a sort of secondary kind of question, but it's also fundamental. There has been a study of this unconscious, perception in, brain lesion patient, for example, in a blind side, and there isn't a very obscure description that even those people who are completely blind, they can still do some kind of similarity judgment, but it's not really clear. And we are currently doing the experiments in my lab to make the things gradually visible to invisible, and then see whether the similarity structure remains or completely collapse. And our results so far is that if you don't see it, your similarity structure will collapse. So probably qualia is necessary to get the reliable relationship. It doesn't have to be distance, but the relationship needs to be there, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so you first the question is my qualia structure the same as yours? I hope answer is no, because everybody has a different experience and the diversity we have. So taste for cake for mine and the taste for cake for yours should be different.
Right.
Because we respect, differentiation.
Right. Yeah, so that's true. And I also believe that other than color, most likely many different kind of modality, you will have an individual difference, probably. And as I briefly alluded to, autistic people seems to have a very different kind of, distinct structure for the touch. And also we are now redoing this 93 by 93 color experiments on the individual subjects, on the both 3 typical and the 4 self-identified colorblind and the 3 intermediate people, and then it turns out that within typical there is some difference, and within a colorblind there is also some difference, but they can be aligned within them. But intermediate people is also slightly aligned to this and slightly aligned to that, and there isn't we still don't know how to disentangle sort of the cognitive or decision-based kind of influence on this, but most likely it's not the same, completely the same as this. But the point of our experiment is that there is a way to quantify the degree of the similarity. Most likely our color, your color is very similar compared to my taste and your taste, for example. That's my hope. And by the way, I just wanted to thank you guys from 50 to 69% increase. And hopefully this didn't decrease or increase, no. 11%, did it increase from the beginning? Maybe?
No, it's 15.
15? So it's a bit decrease, okay. Yeah, okay. And if you have further questions here, yes?
So So you didn't talk about the language today, because I have impression that the red is already the colors in the English system. For example, the aka is Japanese. It's different from English, right? Because aka, we have the color structure like a shuiro. This is slightly different from the aka as Chinese.
Right.
And also more extreme case, for example, language of the barrier.
Right.
There is only 2 words to denote the colors.
Right.
So how do you, how I can say it's this structure, I'm wondering how much it is reflected on the language structure.
Right. That's one of the things that we are also, investigating very, avidly. There is definitely an influence from language to qualia. And why I started to be convinced about that is that when we compare the color structure, as Tanison asked in the intermediate, right? When we compare the human-based similarity structure to the RGB similarity structure or CIE lab structure, which is psychophysicist's favorite, it's completely different. But when we use a ChatGPT 3.5, which was only trained on the language, right, and a relatively few amount of the language body, they match like almost 35% or something like that. But then GPT-4 came, and then GPT-4 was trained on both vision and also language and many different kind of modality-wise. And then they matched very well. So most likely there is some kind of categorical kind of influence is going on in our experience of similarity, right? But at the same time, there is also evidence in psychophysics, which is also something that I'm very interested in replicating, that within Iranian population, I don't know exactly why, but Iranian people seem within that study have a very different number of the color vocabulary. Like some people have only very few, and some people have super huge vocabulary. And then they tested the color discriminability. Everybody is almost the same. So when you show 2 colors at the same time, and then how different, how similar they are, almost everybody is the same. But what the differ was the memory. The strength of the memory was completely correlated with the amount of the vocabulary. And my guess is that that's probably also similar to taste and things like that, like wine tasting kind of thing is, very famously, exemplified by the wine experts tend to barbarize a lot, right? With a very different kind of adjective, which I don't understand, like smooth or circular or whatever. They probably can remember really well, but when we taste 2 things at the same time or one after the other, probably know these people are more similar. Yeah.
Thank you for the very insightful talk. My question is, I think, following up with this question, is how does your approach handle dynamic changes in qualia? I imagine, for example, that learning to differentiate wine flavors or learning to differentiate musical tones can significantly enrich your qualia over time.
Right.
So is your approach able to handle this kind of situation?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting and also something that we are also trying to do as well. The developmental study is to some extent addressing that question. And also one of the study we are doing the similarity between the words of the color, like 9 words and 9 emotions. And it turned out that this was our first kind of encounter of such a thing. But people who rate they are currently depressed, their structure differs from the people who are not depressed. So if you consider this state of the depression as a momentary change in how we experience the world, then they do affect on such a structure. That's one thing. And also looking at the, let's say, Japanese sound similarity wise, we are also doing some kind of crazy experiment from we do the similarity one by one. And then we already have the similarity matrix from Japanese people. And then the question is, if we do exactly the same experiment on, let's say, American people or European people who have never heard of the Japanese sound, it's probably different, right? If there is an influence, but we don't know. Yeah.
Well, very nice talk. If you take two different photons of light with different wavelengths, for instance, blue and 450 or green or 500 nanometers,
Right.
you can say, oh, these two colors have 50 nanometers difference.
Right.
But what is the approach for the two different persons for two different colors? Let's say that one person try to distinguish these two colors, and is there a difference of so the two colors could be very different from him, but
Right.
actually on the spectrum of flows.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say probably, but the kind of the answer I gave also to Tani-san is that if you base similarity structure based on the physical characteristic of the wavelength, it doesn't predict our similarity structure at all. And in fact, this is most easy to see for you yourself, which is that infrared light is very close to invisible, but slightly longer light becomes like orange or red. Okay, and then the ultraviolet, which is also impossible to see for us, but then as it becomes longer, it starts to become like a violet. And this is most different in terms of wavelength, longest and the shortest that you can see. But almost everybody, including children, violet and then red is very close in perception. The pattern of the cone receptor activation is completely different, but our experience is more similar to that.
We cannot judge.
We cannot judge. It's a very different kind of mechanism that is operating on. Maybe should we? Yeah.
Me? Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was just.
Thank you for the talk. Okay, so I guess I'm maybe from a bit of a different camp than some of the people here. For me, it's not so. I guess I'm not. So I agree that qualia is something that's very interesting, and I commend you for doing this research, and I think it's very interesting. However, I don't think that, at least to me, it's not clear that this is going towards solving the hard problem of consciousness. Specifically, if we consider this example that you give, if you consider a complete inverted qualia swap, then there's no real way of distinguishing between individual people and what they perceive, right?
Yeah.
And then also, if you ask questions about like panpsychism or alternative things other than integrated information theory, I don't think you're getting any answers into. You're sort of adopting an interpretation of what qualia is, and then taking that at right and looking at the functional description of qualitative experience.
Right.
Which I'm not so convinced that solves the problem.
You're obviously an expert. Maybe we can chat later, or in the tea time after this.
Yeah, happy to talk.
Maybe somebody else over there. Do you have a question?
Just wanted to ask if you look at this kind of experiment with temperature and humidity.
Temperature and humidity.
That's something which people feel very differently.
Especially
probably even men and women, definitely.
There is one person who is starting to do some kind of similar to the sports, and then under the different humidity and the temperature, this similarity may change. But I don't know. But that's very interesting kind of question, I think. There can be huge inter-individual difference. Yes.
Yeah, I think that you approach the hard problem is solving because you say that RGB does not correspond to the similarity mapping things, but if you find a neural property which can reconstruct same things,
right? I
think you almost solve the hard problem.
Right. That in a sense, that's my answer. It's a different theory than what we know. Yes.
So you have a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah.
But there is also a question to Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
And I pick up one that is not shown here. So it is, sorry. So since consciousness is a slow phenomena with the brain dynamics correspondent of qualia being embedded in slow frequencies, alpha, beta, delta, etc., and of non-qualia in high frequencies, gamma.
This is not the question that we have explicitly addressed, but my guess is probably that higher level frequency is probably more related, but it's also plausible that yeah, even non-activity is corresponding to some kind of qualia as well. So activity per se to qualia is not yeah, currently clear to link. What's this? This is German, right?
You are getting the question to your own side. That is my understanding.
Right. So what does it mean here? I can't read.
What you cannot speak about, thou shalt be silent. Of what you cannot speak about, you shall be silent.
I oppose to that. I would say the qualia is basically, you know, that really beyond the words. I would say, like, you know, this texture over there, I can't really describe each of the difference, but I know that they are different. And there has been a really strong kind of bias in the so-called objective science, where, you know, as you say, or as this says, verbalization or characterization or rationalization is the only thing that you can admit as a sort of object of science. But the scientification, sort of, is to make the things that was not possible to quantify into measurable, manipulable, and inferential. So in that sense, I disagree with this.
This is Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I disagree with Wittgenstein. Measure the illusion experience such as yes. So there is some of my colleague who is also trying to use an illusion and then its similarity, and now that's also very interesting kind of thing. Read manage data loss during mapping. Is if you can elaborate on that, it would be great. But if what you mean by data loss is something of the, you know, kind of barbarization of the qualia, then it's exactly what I kind of, you know, said against Wittgenstein. Like, even if at each moment you cannot completely verbalize or, you know, express your experience one by one, the collection of many different kind of, you know, reports together can recover this richness. That's the sort of the idea. You know, each single moment of the report is very poor, but, you know, as a whole, it can be possible. Top down or bottom up, I haven't a specific kind of idea about this, but it's beyond. It's probably neither. It's more structural thing is more lateral. That's the sort of the quick kind of answer to this. All right.
Okay, if you don't have any other questions.
I have last short question.
Okay, very short.
I want to just why the structure is same for humans. What makes the structure same
between the people?
Yeah, between people.
That's an interesting question, but if the structure is not the same, then in terms of experience, then we do not have a sort of shared kind of, you know, structural experience. And in fact, you know, the color is something that is super fundamental, most likely, and that's why it's shared, right? But the linguistic structure or sound structure or sort of the similarity between, let's say, some kind of skills, or let's say, you know, on the shogi board or, you know, ego board, for experts, this and this is very similar, but for the novice, it's completely different.
So the kawa is really basic sensation, so the language cannot act a lot, but maybe you're saying that the more complicated skills or some other sensation is affected by the language or culture. Or...
Yeah, something like that can be more affected as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I want to. Yeah, maybe you have a lot of questions, but I want to close this officially. Thank you very much.
Thank you.